A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. No sentence in our Constitution has incited more controversy over the past 50 years. While some states and cities have tried to work around the Second Amendment, there are gun control advocates calling for its outright repeal. To learn more about that campaign, let's welcome Lee Goodman, Sally Nador, and George Uzlengi from Peaceful Communities, an organization working to prevent violence and promote peace, justice, fairness, and the common good. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Why did you start Peaceful Communities?
Well, because there are problems and there are people who wanted to fix the problems, and it's as simple as that. So we're all a bunch of volunteers, and we've been working on a number of issues, spent the last several years particularly working on the problem of gun violence, which is, in our area, something to be considered.
When people say that we should be working around it, that there's different contexts, that we shouldn't be so extreme as to repeal the Second Amendment, why do you think it's necessary?
The Second Amendment keeps us from enacting the laws that most people want to have in place. Once we get rid of the Second Amendment, then our governments at all levels are free to do what the people want.
Sally, what brings you here?
Well, I became involved in this through Lee, and actually through Lee's wife, Nancy, first in protesting, and at one point Lee and Nancy and I and others went on a road tour to protest gun shops and machine gun factories along the I-80 corridor. So I think it's been one event after another for me that has really helped me understand the patience people have for this issue and how divided folks are about it, but how we just really need to get rid of guns. We just need to not have them around. And the way in which holding on to the Second Amendment prevents that. People grasp it like it's a life raft, and I'm not sure why.
I was really troubled at what has been going on in Chicago during the last few years. The number of murders and the number of people seriously injured by guns is astonishing, and in a modern society, to my mind, it's intolerable. I was so upset that I started something that I have never done before, getting involved in active politics. I am a university professor specializing in electronics, so I am as far away as you would want to be from political activity. But at the 2016 election, in the township of Oak Park, where I reside, I spearheaded an advisory, non-binding referendum to abolish the Second Amendment. That referendum passed with almost 65% of the vote. And in talking to the people, both pro and con, I realized that we are in a country that is deeply divided on this issue. But what I cannot understand is why we cannot have our legislators enact some reasonable legislation at the federal level. There is no national registry for guns. Why there is no mandatory insurance for having guns? We have to have insurance to drive a car. Why shouldn't we have insurance to carry a gun?
So you mentioned the analogy to cars, that cars can be really dangerous to use, and many people have died from car crashes, and couldn't they just decide to walk or take public transit? Why do people use cars at all? And how we've resolved that is we say people should wear seat belts. They've made cars safer, and they've had people purchase insurance. So if there are legitimate uses for cars, I think there would be people who would argue there are legitimate uses for guns, and people can use them responsibly. So why, again, decide to try to repeal the Second Amendment when people would argue that means that you're going to take away guns completely?
But it doesn't. Repealing the Second Amendment doesn't make any difference until and unless we enact other laws that affect gun ownership. All that repeal does is say, now we can enact those laws. It doesn't ban guns. It doesn't do anything except for enable the people through our elected representatives to enact the exact type of laws you just mentioned, which we've done. And in the context of automobiles, we brought the death rate through automobile accidents down continuously, steadily for the last couple of decades. At the same time, we've done nothing about the death rate due to guns, and that's continued to increase.
How do you build support? You mentioned that this is a divisive issue. How do you bring people in?
Well, it takes a very long time to enact the constitutional amendment. As you will know, we have had, 26, 27 amendments enacted over about 2.5 centuries. One amendment, the Equal Rights Amendment, is still pending. After so many years, an amendment on the pay to legislators were approved after 203 years after it was first proposed. So I have no illusion that the Second Amendment will be abolished tomorrow. But I think that we have to do something now and push in that direction. And as Lee pointed out, the reason why the Second Amendment must go is because it is used as a screen by our legislators to do nothing to protect the people.
You know, there's a principle in the Jewish tradition that says you don't have to finish solving a problem, but you do have to start. You must start. And, you know, that speaks to me in this issue. Every time I'm standing outside holding up a protest sign, I'm starting. And it may be a long time before this problem is fixed. But
can you talk a little bit more about how your faith informs your work?
I know Lee from our Reformed Jewish congregation. That's how I know Lee. And as we were talking before, it is a very socially conscious organization, and there are a lot of things going on, and this is a very big issue.
We've got people working with us from all faiths that I've heard of. We certainly have Christians and Jews and Muslims and Hindu and all kinds of people. And what's been interesting to me is that at some point or another, people from all of those faiths have said they've been brought to this work by the teachings of their faith. So there seems to be something universal in all of the faiths that says we have to address these concerns and do something about them.
I was brought up as a Roman Catholic, and I cannot see how anybody who is a reasonable person, and I don't care, it could be a Christian, a Muslim, a Jew, a Buddhist, a Shintoist, an atheist, how a reasonable person can oppose some regulations that will save tens of thousands of lives. I'm appealing specifically, from what I know, to the Christian tradition. How can you call yourself a Christian and say, no, I don't want any limitation on gun control, and I don't care, okay, next year another 40,000 people will be killed. It's not my problem. I just want the ability to carry a gun in my pocket if I want to. This is absurd. This is not a Christian message.
Thank you, Lee, Sally, and George, for being here today and sharing with us.
Thank you very much for having us here.
I'm Liz Dunn for Different Drummers and the Greater Chicago Broadcast Ministries. Keep the faith.